Justice and Correctional Services Minister Ronald Lamola will launch the Master's Office Deceased Estate online registration system this week. The department says the system aims to bring services to clients across the country more speedily, enhancing access to justice. The Master's Office executed successful pilot programs in March, April and August when the system's functionality was rigorously examined. The technology will be introduced in Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town and Pretoria and gradually expanded to other regions. Joining me now is Advocate Kanyane Mathibe, who is the Chief Director of Strategy and Policy in the Office of the Master. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. I mean, losing a loved one on its own is devastating, and winding up their estate can further contribute to the hardship and the frustration because of the unforeseen delays. How does this system help?
Good morning, Paul. The system is aimed to reduce some of the challenges or minimize some of the challenges that we've experienced in the Master's Office and that clients have experienced as well. When losing a loved one, mostly members of the public would be expected to visit the Master's Office within 14 days of the passing of the loved one to report an estate with the Master of the High Court. That in itself says that people that are still grieving need to queue in the Master's Office at a time like that and to lodge an estate. What the system does, it takes away the queuing, it takes away the long turnaround times of getting a letter of executorship or a letter of authority by bringing that service to the client's home. So what it means is that clients would be able to lodge estates in the Master's Office in the comfort of their homes, in the comfort of their offices in case of legal practitioners, in case of fiduciary professionals who act on behalf of clients.
So what difference will this online registration make, especially looking at some of the challenges which may lead to delays? I mean, the delays of winding up an estate are often the really frustrating part of it.
Yes. What we aim to do first is to actually speed up the service delivery in terms of deceased estates. That means that once you've lodged an estate, I think the first step is you need to register yourself as a user on the system. And this is to ensure that in the case where there is an account, that means it's the estate is above 250,000. That is where a letter of executorship would then be issued as opposed to a letter of authority. There would still be a need to submit an account with the Master's Office. What we call a liquidation and distribution account will still need to be lodged, and that allows the user to have that username for the duration of that period until the estate is wound up. Now, in the case of an estate less than 250,000, it also allows you to get access to other justice services, online services in the future. It's not just for deceased estates. But what the other advantages of the system, it reduces cost of transport to the Master's Office. It increases efficiency because you would no longer need to visit the Master's Office to collect a letter of authority or executorship. You can get it through your email. You can get it through an SMS, depending on the method that you chose, the method of correspondence that you chose when you registered.
You've made mention of the different tiers as you break down the amounts of the estates, and that in itself can be something very complex for the public to understand because different rules apply to each type of asset. How do we begin to understand the different assets and the different processes that will then unfold if you're looking at a car, perhaps, or as opposed to a house?
Well, the consolidated assets of an estate, if they are less than 250,000, then a letter of authority would then be issued. This is to say that we appoint an administrator of the estate who would administer the estate and see to the distribution of the deceased assets. Now, when there is the estate is more than 250,000, that is where then they would also need the assistance of a legal practitioner or somebody who's well trained in the deceased estate, like a fiduciary professional, would then assist them in the winding up of the estate. That is where an account would need to be submitted by a legally trained professional who would then submit the account. We would need to make sure that there is no tax liability as well with the South African Revenue Service, and that if there's any estate duty that is due and payable, that it is paid before we distribute the assets of the deceased. But there is also another distinction. The distinction is with where there is a will, that is a testate estate, and where there is no will is intestate estate, which then devolves in terms of the order of succession. Whereas where there is a will, there is clarity in terms of the heirs of the estate, there's clarity in terms of who the executor is. That's why we encourage people to execute wills whilst they're still alive, so that when the winding up of their estate is submitted to the master, there is certainty and clarity.
Yeah, because the will certainly make the process a lot easier. What about the elderly or those who may not have access to the internet? What sort of assistance can be availed to them, which will result in them experiencing the same services and the advantages of a process which is seemingly going to be easier?
I think at the Masters, we are alive to the plight of many South Africans who might not have access or decent access to technology, the elderly who are not tech savvy, and we're not precluding them from this service. What we are going to do, we are setting up self-service kiosks in the master's offices. We're setting up staff-assisted kiosks. So in the event that an elderly person visits a master's office, we would still be able to assist them to lodge the estate digitally and not manually on our system. There are certain people that also feel a face-to-face interaction is far better than working with a computer, and we still welcome those in our offices, except in this instance we'll only help them with the lodging of the estate on the system. So we're not precluding anybody from coming to the master's office, but if you are tech savvy, you know how to use a computer or any device, because this can be done on multiple devices, we encourage them to do that in the comfort of their homes to reduce the queues in the master's office. But we would still be servicing them, and we encourage also grandchildren, children, to assist the elderly at home to register estates. But if they are not comfortable with that, we would still welcome them in our offices.
You're punting quicker registration process as one of the advantages to the system. I mean, we know that this could take a year or even more with the slow process that has been incurred over the years. When you say quick, what sort of timeframes are you aiming for?
Ordinarily, when you submit or you report an estate, our commitment in terms of service is 21 working days, a turnaround time of 21 working days for you to receive a letter of executorship or authority. Now, in this event, when we tested in the pilot sites, where we tested in Johannesburg, we tested in Pretoria, we tested in Pretoria, in Durban, we tested in Cape Town. The turnaround time has been far quicker, to 2 days in issuing a letter of authority. What makes it quicker is that we have now people that are our estate controllers who are legally trained professionals. They usually, or in the current process, they would capture the estate on the system. Now, in this case, the client would be capturing the estate. What they would need to do is validate the information in front of them and submit it for approval.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time there and explaining that process. Advocate Kanyane Mathibe, who is the Chief Director of Strategy and Policy at the Master of the High Court, of course, speaking about the Department of Justice launching a Master's Deceased Estate online registration